And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Looking at tonight's weather chart here, we've got high pressure building out here over the Bering Sea, centered near the Aleutians, extending all the way up into Russia ahead of the next front farther to the west there. And between the ridge and lower pressure here to the east, we still have north to south flow, possibly gusting to 40, 45 miles an hour at the most here along the Alaska Peninsula, with showers really scattering out and ending as you head north here. Chance of some light rain and snow showers there for the Bering Strait, northern Seward Peninsula, and some light snow possible for the western Arctic coast there, and dry over the interior. We've got this low tracking more westward right into Prince William Sound as it came up the coastline, just kind of following the coastline right into the sound tonight, and it'll weaken, and that'll bring rain from Prince William Sound eastward into the northern panhandle. Winds and precipitation will diminish eventually in the south, and then for tomorrow, that front breaks up here in the northern area, and the southern portion pushes into British Columbia. This low tracks a little bit to the southeast there, and the flow around that continues to pull a lot of moisture up into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound area, eastern Kenai Peninsula, and stays wet over the panhandle, but not as wet over the southern areas. Dry in the interior, chance of snow for the western Arctic coast, and slowly diminishing winds here along the west coast to the Alaska Peninsula with diminishing showers as well. Higher pressure out here to the west kind of falls apart, moves in a little bit. Weak high pressure here over the western interior on Tuesday ahead of this weak system. It'll push rain into the southwest coast, Nunivak Island and the Pribilofs. And a system down here to the south will bring some rain to the central Aleutians, otherwise partly sunny skies, Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island. And low pressure off the south central coast of the Panhandle keeps showers in the area there with light rain in the south and more showery, lighter precipitation up to the north. Could be a dry day possibly for the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound. Coastal water forecast for tonight on the south coast here, south winds 20 to 25 knots. And the north coast, east-southeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas at 11 feet. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, and Stevens Passage winds southeast at 20 knots with higher gusts, and south winds at 20 knots for Clarence Strait. And then for the day on Tuesday, southeast winds 15 knots for all of the inside channels, and seas down to about 3 feet. And on the south coast, looking at south winds at 20 knots. And east-southeast winds 20 knots with higher gusts. And then the north coast here, looking at east winds at 15 knots with 7-foot seas. Cook Inlet tomorrow, north to northeasterlies at about 10. Otherwise, northwest 25 for Kamishak Bay, northwest 20 for the Barren Islands. And the North Gulf Coast, east to northeast winds at 20. And Prince William Sound, east winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas. And for the day on Tuesday, Cook Inlet, north to northwest winds, pretty light at 10 to 15 knots, 2 to 4-foot seas. A little windier here for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands with northwest winds at 30 knots, seas near 10 feet. Light variable winds for the western North Gulf Coast, light north winds for Prince William Sound, and north to northeast winds 15 to 20 knots for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots. Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 30 to 35 knots. And Bristol Bay, northwest winds 25 knots. For the day on Tuesday, west-northwest winds lighter now, 15 to 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, northwest at 25 for Bristol Bay, and Kodiak Island, northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Eastern Aleutians, Monday, northwesterlies at 20 to 30 knots with seas up to 11 feet. Adak and Atka, northwest at 15, 4 to 8-foot seas there. And then from Kiska to Shemya, south to southwest winds 20 to 25 knots. And for the day on Tuesday, west of Adak, we've got east to southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. And for the central Aleutians here, south at 25 to 30 knots. And the Fox Islands, west-southwesterlies at 15 knots with 3 to 6-foot seas. And for the southwest coast, Monday, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots and northwest at 25. Also for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island with 5 to 6 foot seas. And for the Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island, northwest winds 25 knots, 7 to 9 foot seas. Then for the day on Tuesday, for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, west winds at 15 knots. Yukon Delta coastline, south at 10, seas 2 feet. Northwest at 15 for both Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island, and southwest winds at 20 knots for St. Matthew Island, as well as the Pribilofs. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, west to southwest winds, 10 to 15 knots. Light winds for the central coast, north at 10 for the western Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea, small craft advisories, northwest winds 25 knots with seas running 6 to 7 feet. And for the Chukchi Sea on Tuesday, northwest winds a little bit lighter at about 20 knots, seas 4 feet. Northwest at 15 for the western Arctic coast, and for the central coast, pretty light, west at 10 knots, and then the east side here, winds will be west at 15 to 20 knots with seas up to 4 feet.